So, hello everybody. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Daniel Brer Ortega, and I am the program specialist of the SGSO Network. And I'm also joined today with our wonderful presenters, Rachel Black, Executive Director, and Ann Deng, Cafeteria to Compost Program Manager from the Garden School Foundation. So today we're going to talk about starting school-based composting programs. We're going to learn about the history and how the program works at the Garden School Foundation, and we're going to learn some steps you can take to also start your own programs as well. Food waste diversion is so important. So I'm really glad that we're talking about this, especially when it comes to school cafeterias. So just a couple housekeeping things. A recording of this webinar will be shared via email to all of your inboxes, and it will also live in a recording library on the SGSO Network website, which I will drop in the chat shortly. There is also a resource handout that will be shared in the chat as well. And it also includes slides that you can follow along with if you need them. And it is going on the chat right about now. There we go. And then for your own planning, this is a 75-minute webinar. It includes 1 hour of content and then a final 15-minute Q&A at the end. So if you have questions for the presenters, feel free to share them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, or drop them in the chat. I will make a note of it, and then we will have our wonderful presenters answer the questions at the end. And as always, we love hearing your feedback, what you loved about this webinar, as well as what topics you would like to hear more of in the future. So please consider using the feedback survey link in the chat below at the end. So you can tell us about your experience at the webinar today, as well as topics that you would like us to touch upon in future webinars as well. Before we get started, just a couple notes on what's going on at the network. We're launching an amazing selection of peer learning communities. And yeah, we can go on to the next slide. We're launching an amazing selection of peer learning communities. These are communities that are proposed by members, organized by members, and managed by members. So folks have approached us and said that they would like to meet around these different topics, and it can be about role, it can be specific to organizational types, by region, or we also have affinity groups. And these are spaces where members are able to network, collaborate, and talk shop around challenges and successes or best practices in their roles, their organizations, or network amongst their regions. We also have affinity groups, which are similar spaces, except these are specifically for folks of certain identities to gather, support each other, and network as well. So if you would like to join a PLC today, you can scan the QR code or use the link that is in the chat if you would like to learn more about the peer learning communities. And if you would like to start one, you can send an email to info@sgsonetwork.org so we can talk about what next steps can be taken to get your peer learning community started. Next slide, please. And then as always, this webinar is part of our Growing School Garden Summit webinar series. So the Growing School Garden Summit was hosted by the Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation back in March, and this was done in partnership with LifeLab and the SGSO Network. And this series is all about bringing you some amazing presentations from the Growing School Garden Summit into a webinar format. So if you missed a session or if you weren't able to join us, you're able to catch it as well during this webinar series. If you would like to learn more, please visit our website as well. And without further ado, I will pass it on to our presenters of today.
Great. Thank you everyone for joining us. Our presentation today will be all about our Cafeteria to Compost program and how we do that working on school campuses. So for today's agenda, Anna and I will introduce ourselves. We'll go into Garden School Foundation and what we do. We'll do a deep dive into our Cafeteria to Compost program. And then if some of you were at the Growing School Gardens event in last March and you were in our presentation, we have some updates since then that we'll be including in number 4, new initiatives. We'll be talking about next steps and then go into our Q&A. Great. So I'm Rachel Black. I'm the executive director of Garden School Foundation. I use she, her pronouns, and have been with the organization for 10 years. I was a food corps service member, a garden educator, a programs manager before becoming executive director. And then Anne, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anne. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the program manager for our Cafeteria to Compost program. And similar to Rachel, I started at Garden School Foundation as a food corps service member, served for 2 years, and then I was an educator at one of our school sites before stepping into this role of program manager.
Great. And then we are both with Garden School Foundation, which is a nonprofit based in LA. We really work at the intersections of food justice, food access, training the next generation of environmental stewards, and raising community health more broadly. We have a bunch of different programs, including our educational Seed to Table program, as well as this Cafeteria to Compost program, which you'll learn a lot about. We also host free farmers markets, and then we have weekend community garden days for folks to get involved in the garden. We currently serve 10 Title I schools throughout LA. 9 are part of LA Unified School District, so the second largest school district in the country. And 1 is part of Pasadena Unified School District. So a lot of what we talk about today, all of the schools that we work with for Cafeteria to Compost are part of LA Unified. So just know, some of the hurdles or things that we have gone through is really because it's such a large school district, and there's a lot of red tape, things like that. We are celebrating our 20th year of Garden School Foundation this year. So, and our Cafeteria to Compost program is slightly younger than that, but again, lots of experience working with different schools, different districts, implementing programming. And our Cafeteria to Compost program. So this is our second largest program. We currently run it in 5 of our Title I LAUSD schools. It was established in 2018. LA was really looking to figure out what impact food waste was having on the city. So they funded a pilot that had grant funding, and did a big call out to all different sorts of organizations, businesses, to just try to help understand what food waste looked like in LA. So we applied after, having almost 15 years on a campus and seeing what goes on in the cafeteria daily and knowing that there's a lot of food waste that happens in that space, but not having the funds or the staff to really dedicate to finding out really what that looked like. So in 2018, we received a city-funded pilot program that was, I believe, for about 6 months. The first 3 months were for really getting an understanding of what was happening in the cafeteria. So we had staff in there. We did a waste audit where we would pull out all of the school's waste after lunch, separate it, look at what was in there, see how much was uneaten, how much was partially eaten, and what else was contained in that. And then we started implementing a separation program, really, again, trying to see what it took and how much we were able to save from the landfill. After kind of seeing those numbers, when that pilot and grant funding ended, we couldn't with a good conscience stop the program. And so that's when we started kind of putting out feelers, trying to see if there was anyone else out there who could help support the work. And Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation came to the call, and they have been funding it since the 2019-2020 school year. So hugely grateful for them, especially as they've helped us champion it, not only by helping to fund it, but by including resources, giving us connections, and helping us work with other folks outside of just our network. Now, Cafeteria to Compost, again, we run it in 5 of our schools. The last couple of years, it has been 3. So when we look at some of the data and things, know that that's only representing 3 of the schools that we work with, but this year we expanded to 2 more. And it really is a food waste diversion and redistribution program. The nice thing is that it really helps us tackle things with the students where climate anxiety, climate literacy is a big push within LAUSD and Pasadena Unified. But also we're seeing that school districts, teachers are kind of stumped with how to implement that. So Cafeteria to Compost has been a really wonderful opportunity to not only have a topic to deeply dive into climate change and everything that's happening, but also, as we know, students are really impacted by, their mental health is really impacted by climate change. You know, even if they are really young in elementary school, they're aware of kind of the anxiety that adults are feeling. They're aware of the conversations, they're aware of the natural disasters and how it's impacting them. And so one thing that studies have really shown is that giving students or giving children an opportunity to act is one of the best ways to help with that anxiety. So every day students are not only separating their food, but there are some lessons paired with that. And then they're also getting opportunities to engage in it outside of the cafeteria. So as I mentioned, we have 3 different schools where we run Cafeteria to Compost. You know, one of the things that our schools ask is, how are you going to be doing this? This was a question with the district, like, what space are you going to be used to be making these piles? How are you going to make this happen? And so we intentionally chose the 3 schools that we partnered with because they looked so different. So the 3 schools we have had this program in before this year was 24th Street Elementary, which is our flagship site. The garden is an acre. And so we were able to carve out a corner of it to have piles. So if you look the photo right under C2C schools, that is our Cafeteria to Compost corner at 24th Street Elementary. They have about 500 students. And these are the piles. We do hot composting piles. And this was the area that we were able to dedicate to that program. If you look at the topmost picture, that is at Grandview Boulevard Elementary. That school has about 750 students, so that's our largest school. Their garden is small, but they have expansive blacktop. And so we really wanted to know, A, what does Cafeteria to Compost and those numbers look like for a school that large, but also what does it look like when we're building compost piles on blacktop? And so you can see there's a lot of piles in that space. However, we are able to just do it on blacktop. We also, for both of these schools, receive mulch from the district. So, and they have wood chippers anytime they're doing tree pruning, taking down a tree. They do chop it, you know, put it through the wood chipper for us, deliver it, and we're able to use that as the browns to kind of even out the food that we're getting. You know, we did a lot of research on what helps keep pests away, you know, all of the fun things that understandably schools are worried about. And we did find that this system really worked well. And then the 3rd school that we operated at was Wilshire Crest Elementary School. It is a unique gem. It only has about 120 kids in pre-K through 5th grade. And so we actually found that while their garden is large and large enough to have piles in the garden, similar to 24th Street, we actually didn't need that. And so we just used the 3 black bins and then a tumbler, and we're able to have capacity for all of the food, the lunch waste that we have at that school site. So again, we chose these 3 different schools because of the sizing, because of their space, and what would be necessary. It's been a fun adventure to kind of see how everything works. And again, at 3 different size schools, 3 different size gardens, and all that's possible. So our program has many different facets to it. One key part is education. So as I mentioned, you know, climate literacy is a big topic right now in California, in LA, I'm sure where you all are as well. And so composting is really the perfect opportunity for us. As I mentioned, it gives students that opportunity to be hands-on, to not only do that separation at the end of the lunch period, but we also have students who are coming in and helping with that compost pile maintenance. So whether they're smashing the lunch, as you can see here in this picture with their trowels, whether they are helping to build soil, whether they're helping to build piles, whether they're helping to collect browns that aren't mulch. So sometimes they'll go around, collect leaves, sticks, all those things from the garden. We also have an opportunity for them to do some soil experiments and understand how compost impacts soil, what soil looks like without compost. And then of course they're using that compost in the garden beds in our rows as the finished product. We also have some NGSS aligned lessons, as I'm sure for most of you, that is an ask by the district, is that all of our programming has a standards aligned curriculum, and Next Generation Science Standards is a easy plug-in. And so not only do we have a 4th grade unit on soil science where they're doing experiments understanding the different types of soil, different components of soil, again, how compost impacts that, learning more of like the hard science behind soil. But we also have lessons sporadically through each of the different grades that focus on different aspects of compost. So for an example, we have a kindergarten compost quest lesson where they're getting a pile of compost, partially decomposed compost, a little doctored if we can add a couple things in there, but getting them to explore and understand like how composting works. Another example is with 3rd graders. We do have their theme for their 3rd grade unit is adaptations. And so we do a red wiggler or worm biography lesson where they are learning about the adaptations of red wigglers and then writing a biography from that worm's perspective. And then other opportunities for students to get involved. And then again, going back to climate literacy and climate action, outside of the lessons that students are getting from Seed to Table, all students that are at our Cafeteria to Compost schools also get 2 additional lessons that are purely based on Cafeteria to Compost. So everyone gets an Intro to Cafeteria to Compost lesson in August. It really covers like what you're going to see in the cafeteria, what you have to do. There's a game where we show different things that might be on their lunch plate and they decide which bin it goes into. So they'll have like a green sticky note or a brown sticky note based on which bin it goes into. Just really that first lesson is to kind of remind students who are returners what to expect, new students, kind of what happens in the cafeteria, but really trying to streamline that process as, lunchtime is short. When they get dismissed, if they have recess after lunch, that is a mad dash. So really just trying to ease that transition in the cafeteria. And then they also get an opportunity to have a second lesson in January. Every student gets. Part of that is, hey, remember what we were doing in December before winter break? It's going to be happening again in January because winter break is a magical time where everything you knew before winter break just goes out the window. So we use that to kind of reorient students, but then also jump into more climate literacy issues. So talking about what's going on locally in LA or in California, we talk about what it takes to get food to your plate and how, choosing more wisely, whether what you're going to eat, what you're not going to eat, whether it's, why we then have a share table that we're redistributing after school to families, but really having them understand the weight of their food and what it takes to get it to their plate, and then what we're doing to kind of mitigate that process afterwards. So we have a lot of different opportunities for education. Again, also a lot of opportunities for students to do hands-on work in the garden, whether that is turning the piles, taking temperatures of piles, and Anne will dive into a little bit later. Also our student-led initiative that's for upper grade students as a leadership opportunity. Great. And so Cafeteria to Compost by the numbers. So for this program, when we have students in the cafeteria, we have staff in the cafeteria daily, not only helping students or facilitating the separation at the end of the lunch period, but we also have share tables in all of our cafeterias. It's opportunities for students to leave food that they are not going to eat. And also help students who would like more to come up and take whatever they would like. And so on that share table, whatever's left over at the end of the lunch period, or at least this is how it works for LA Unified. Again, your school district may be different, but there needs to be a nonprofit partner who's approved by the district to take ownership of that food, and then you can redistribute it wherever you would like. So for us, we've been approved by the district. After the end of lunch, we take whatever's on the share table, we store it appropriately, and then we bring it out at pickup time. So 2:30 to redistribute to families after school. Usually that food is gone in about 15 to 20 minutes. The schools that we serve are all Title I, so high needs. 24th Street, which was last year, the only school that we were doing this redistribution aspect, is 97% Title I. So a really high needs community. And we redistributed almost 20,000 pounds of food within that one school. And so they have a student population of 500. So at a school with 500 students throughout the year, we almost redistributed 20,000 pounds of uneaten food. And then if we look at the total food composted, that 31,000 pounds, that is from the 3 schools. So again, it's about 1,300 students across the 3 schools. And then this total food composted takes 2 things into account. The first is that, you know, we have 2 different bins for composting at the end of lunch period. One is for municipal composting. LA does provide green bins to all businesses, schools, households, etc. And so we do put some things in that municipal compost that, you know, just either would take too long in our own composting system or might attract some of the pests that we are worried about and the district is worried about. So meat, dairy, oily things do go into the green municipal bin. And then we have a brown bucket that represents what goes into our compost in the back of our schools or in our gardens on the asphalt in those tumblers. And so combined, that was a little over 30,000 pounds. And so again, when we're looking at just in one school year in those 3 schools with only 1,300 kids, it's over 50,000 pounds of food that was diverted from the landfill. And so we know, if y'all are here, you know, this is a huge problem. Our school cafeterias, there's a lot of resources that go into that and that is getting wasted. And so, you know, this is just continues to open our eyes and make us realize there needs to be more. And then just as a reverse of the food that we are then bringing into the garden, we're building into our piles. We did create about over 5,000 pounds of compost. That goes pretty quickly when one of those schools has an acre garden. We never have too much compost, but it is, you know, again, a significant amount of compost. So if you're considering doing this at a large school, just recognizing it, you don't have a school garden or you don't have a large school garden, that there will be excess compost that you can share with other individuals. I do just want to add before we move on to Anne's piece that, again, we did expand this to 2 more schools for this upcoming school year. That will add about 800 or 900 students to this number. We also are going to be doing redistribution at all of our school sites. And so we're excited to see what that number is, but we're also working with LA Unified School District's nutrition services to really talk about and look at the different ways that we can reduce this. And Anne will go into that a little bit more when you look at the different ways that you can reduce food waste besides just in the cafeteria.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, so Rachel shared some of the numbers that we produced from our Cafeteria to Compost program, and they're very, very impressive. We do want to reiterate that it really takes a team effort for us to run such a successful program of our size and scale. And so here, this is just a sampling of the many hands that it takes to run a program like ours. And so we have paid staff members who are in the cafeteria working with students every day, teaching them how to separate their food waste accordingly. We also partner with California Climate Action Corps, and we're a host site to a cohort of 10 fellows. California Climate Action Corps started in California, and they have 3 areas of focus to address big issues surrounding climate change. And so it's topics on wildfire resiliency, which is a uniquely California problem, although we are starting to see wildfires in places that we haven't seen before. Urban greening, and then food waste recovery and prevention. And so our program hits that area of focus of food waste recovery and prevention. And so we're able to host fellows who help us with this program. And what's exciting is that the Climate Corps program served as a model and has been adopted on a national scale. And so there is now an American Climate Corps, which is also an AmeriCorps program where you can also be a host site to fellows for a year a year of service at your site. So Climate Corps has been a great resource for us to have that dedicated staff to help us run this program. And then, of course, we also rely on volunteer support. And so for us, we have monthly community garden days. We'll host volunteer groups in our school gardens, and they really help us a lot with more of that manual labor in building and turning our compost piles. And then, of course, we have our students participate every step of the way with us as well, whether that is separating their food waste in the cafeteria to being in the garden, helping us build and turn those piles. Sift compost is one of their favorite activities to do. And then, of course, use that compost in the garden. And then we're also very lucky to be supported by Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation. They've been funding this program for us and being providing the resources necessary for us to have dedicated staff to run this program. And so it really does take a village for us to have a program like ours. And really, the more people that we're able to have help us, the lighter the work is. And we also look to organizations larger than ours for guidance. And so one tool that we have found really helpful is the Institute of Local Self-Reliance's hierarchy to reduce food waste and grow community. And so the EPA also has a scale on preventing food waste, and we specifically like to use this one because of the emphasis on growing community. So it incorporates a lot of smaller scale composting initiatives that not only prevent food waste, divert food waste from landfills, but is really a tool to get more people involved in our efforts. And so using the Institute of Local Self-Reliance's hierarchy on preventing food waste is how we have modeled our program. And so at the very top of that scale is source reduction. And so source reduction means just not generating food waste in the first place, right? So that's reducing portions, taking only what you need, and menu planning around preferences. And so for us, when we are in the cafeteria working with students, we're always reminding them to just take what they want from that cafeteria line. And also sometimes what they're being served is a whole apple or a whole orange. And that's not always accessible for some of our students, whether they have like a loose tooth and they can't bite into that apple. That portion size is a little too much for like a kindergarten student. And so what we do is we'll simply just cut their fruit for them, and we'll exchange their whole apple for 4 slices. And that's one way where we're able to encourage them to eat more of their fruits when it's nicely cut for them. It's easier for them to eat. And then also we're able to prevent a lot of that waste so that we're not seeing just like a half-eaten apple in our compost bin, and we're able to divert those whole pieces onto our share table. And then we are a nonprofit that works in partnership with LAUSD, and so we're in 9 LAUSD schools, and LAUSD is made up of 1,000 schools. And so we personally, we don't have the ability to plan what the menus in the cafeteria, but we do take extensive data around what we're collecting on our share table, how much food waste we're collecting in our bins. And we have collected and analyzed that data. And so we're able to report on trends that we notice in the cafeteria. So whether that's, the barbecue chicken wings that they launched that day was wildly popular with the students, and, we didn't see very much leftovers that day, or the turkey hot dog wasn't a great hit, and we ended up with, 2 buckets full of hot dogs. We record all of that data. and we present it to LAUSD for them to do the decision making around menu planning. And we have applied for a grant in partnership with LAUSD to be able to expand this portion of our program. But this is one area where we really hope we're going to be able to prevent food waste at the source. And so the next tier of the hierarchy in preventing food waste is to rescue edible food. And so essentially what that means is to feed hungry people with the excess food that we collect from the cafeteria. And so a big component of our cafeteria operations is running a share table. And so we're in there always encouraging students to drop off any of their uneaten, unwanted food at the share table. And then also any students who are wanting extra helpings are free to take from that share table as well. At the end of a lunch period, we do find that there is always an excess amount of food at those share tables. And so our team will pack up those leftover items, store them in fridges on campus. And then at the end of the school day during after school pickup, we cart out that food for families to pick up. So Rachel mentioned we're doing a distribution at one of our school sites where that is in a high needs area of Los Angeles. And we're finding that all the food that we bring out does go in about 15 to 20 minutes. So the middle photo is an example of what that after school distribution looks like in any given day. And then the third photo is two of our Climate Corps fellows who help us run after school distribution. One thing we find that we are often left with is milk cartons. And so we have a cooler of milk cartons here. That is the one thing that doesn't always go. And so we partner with a local food bank where we're able to drop off those extra milk cartons there. And then if there are food scraps that, isn't suitable for humans, we find ways to feed it to animals or insects. So in Los Angeles, we're in a more urban area. We don't have livestock, but in one of our school gardens, we do have chickens. And so our chickens are often eating those cafeteria scraps. So here they have some like celery and lettuce. And then we also feed it to our worms. So we have a lot of worm towers in our school gardens, and a lot of those food scraps like the banana peels, apple cores go into our worm bins as well. Okay. And so the next two tiers is composting. And so the Institute of Local Self-Reliance recommends home composting or small scale composting over using larger scale programs. And so in California, there was a bill passed, SB 1383, where now all residents in California have to start composting. And in that way, we utilize the municipal compost by having our students separate their meat and dairy products in one bin, and then we still want to be able to create compost in our school gardens for us to use in our gardens. And so we mainly do hot compost piles. And this is a really great teaching tool for our students. There's always work to be done in our compost corner. And so we have our students help us build these piles that are about 4 feet by 4 feet. We turn them weekly. And so that's another activity where, the more hands on deck, the lighter the work. And then when our piles, as they are quite large, they do need to be sifted. And so that's another just great activity to incorporate the students in the whole composting process. And then we also use the in-vessel containers too at our smaller school sites. And even in our larger school sites, we'll always have some of these vessels as a demonstration of what composting more typically looks like in a smaller scale, like backyard setting or a smaller school garden. And yeah, here's some photos of what our cafeteria operations look like. So it's a very simple infrastructure. We mainly collect our food scraps in 5-gallon buckets, and we color code our buckets. So again, just having students sort their food waste twice so that we're able to utilize the municipal composting system as well as our own school garden system. So we have a brown bucket where they put their meat, dairy, oily foods, cooked foods usually, and then our green bucket are for our like fruit, vegetables, grain-based items. And yeah, it's a very mobile, small scale and affordable system that we set up. Usually we just cart out the materials every day during cafeteria. Run it during the lunch program, and then at the end of a lunch period, usually we're left, we fill up about 6 to 8 buckets, and again, it depends on the size of the school. But this last picture here is an example of what some of the food scraps look like at the end of a lunch period. So we have our, this day the students had bananas, so a lot of banana peels in our green buckets, and then the half-eaten hot dogs are in the other bucket. And yeah, so as I mentioned, our program is quite intensive. We are composting a lot of food waste and diverting a lot of poundage from the landfill. And it does require a lot of like adult hands. And so we were thinking about how we can expand our program and make it adaptable for people who might not have dedicated staff members. If you're a classroom teacher who wants to start a composting program. And so we launched a student-led initiative last year where we have our students really take on more of a leadership role in our composting program. And so we created an application, and we have students apply for a variety of different roles around running a campus-wide composting program. And this initiative was really designed to show that composting can be done at every age level with our upper elementary students, or 4th, 5th, 6th grade students showing us the way. So I'd love to share just some of the great work that came out of that initiative. Okay, and so this is one of our Compost Club team members who was part of the Compost Champions group and created a lot of artwork that we hung up around the school campus just to promote composting. And so in our Compost Club, there's 4 different roles that students can apply for. And the first one is our data scientist. So I mentioned the extensive data that we collect in the cafeteria, whether that's recording the amount of food waste we collect to noting the trends in the cafeteria. And so we have a group of students who help us collect that data in the cafeteria, where they're the ones weighing the buckets, making notes on what was eaten that day, what wasn't eaten, what was left over on the shared table. And then they also help us collect data in the compost corner. So with our hot compost piles, we monitor the temperature. And so we have students monitoring the pile temperatures, reading what needs to be done in the compost. If the temperature is a little low, does that mean that we need to water it or turn it, and things like that. And then we also have them analyze and report that data and come up with different hypotheses of their own. And so one of our students noticed a lot of those milk cartons being left over on the share table. And so they did more of like a qualitative research project and asked, do allergies or lactose intolerance affect the amount of food waste? And so during their their time in Compost Club, they went through the scientific method and developed their hypotheses, and ran their experiment and came up with a conclusion that said, in conclusion, kids just really don't like dairy. They said their hypothesis was 50% correct. That when they interviewed students, a lot of them said that I don't like it, I didn't want it, the cafeteria made me take it, and then some were lactose intolerant, and that's why they couldn't drink the milk. And then we also have students graph the data and share these results with the school campus. And so we also have Compost Crew, which is more of the hands-on work that is involved in composting. And so this is just great for students who don't mind getting their hands dirty. They like working with all the decomposers, and they help us build, maintain, turn the piles. And just want to highlight this one response in the applications on why they wanted to join Compost Crew. And so the student said, the reason why I should join Compost Crew is because I want to let my anger out by smashing the food, and sifting it is calming. Second reason why, I also like caring for insects and bugs, so if I see a bug while doing the job, I'll carefully move it. Unless it's poisonous, I'll grab it with gloves. Third reason why I should join Compost Crew, I'm committed. I'll work whenever, in the morning or whenever needed. Fourth reason why I should join is because I'm not dramatic like other kids. Last reason I should join is because Miss Celis's math is too easy. So I love just that in this response, it touches on the SEL benefits of composting and doing hands-on work where they're able to release their anger by smashing the food. The kids call it Fruit Ninja, and also recognizing that sifting compost is a very calming and meditative task. And yeah, this is just great kind of career training for the kids. The student sounds like they will be a very dedicated worker no matter, what they end up doing. And then we also have our cafeteria captains. So our cafeteria captains are the students who help us during the younger students' lunch periods. And they are there reminding them to use the share table, showing them how to sort out their food waste in those appropriate buckets. And this is a great position for students who are looking more for that leadership and mentorship role on campus. And so another response here from one of our students said, I would love to do the cafeteria because I want to help the little kids. I want to learn how to take care of the environment. I want other people to learn how to take care of the environment. Don't want the kids to not take care of the environment. Lastly, I want to make compost for the plants. And then the fourth role that we carved out is our compost champions. And so this group is more so for students who are artistic and passionate about advocacy. Our compost champions will talk about the importance of composting either through artwork, presentations in front of the school during their monthly assemblies, creating videos, any kind of media that they want to adopt, they get to explore. And so this position really explores the why behind composting. I have another example or sample from one of our applications from a student who applied to be a compost champion. And they said, I think I would be a good person to hire because I'm a great artist and influencer. I got over 100 compliments in 1st to 3rd grade as my drawing improved over the years. I'm also great with kids, except for ones who think they're funny. I also love exploring. So that was written by one of our 4th grade students. And then this group, they created really just awesome artwork around composting, and we're really able to share this message in ways that are more creative and just fun than like we could do. And so I have some samples of stuff that our compost champions created, with the first one being a video, and this is called The Story of the Sad Banana.
Wait, don't throw away your banana in the trash. Why? I love throwing bananas in the trash can. Haven't you heard about the story? What story? The story about the sad banana? The sad banana was like any ordinary banana, eaten and left only the peel, but then he was thrown away in the trash. After a long journey, he ended up at the dump. The banana was left there with all the other trash, nowhere to decompose. The banana couldn't turn into compost, and it wasn't able to grow any more banana trees, all because he was stuck in the dump. That sounds terrible. I don't want my banana to be sad. That's why we compost instead. Here at Grandview, we take fruits, vegetables, and grains that kids aren't able to finish, and we turn it into compost by putting food scraps in these big piles. The food is able to break down in a process called composting, and these piles of food get really hot and they start to decompose, and after some time, we got compost. Compost is a kind of plant fertilizer that we get directly from broken down food. Compost has tons of nutrients and help us grow stuff in the garden, like trees for shade, lettuce for chickens. Excellent. And tons of other fruits and vegetables for students like us. So that's why it's super important for us to compost our food. Let's make sure we don't make any bananas sad. We make our garden happy. Maybe I will compost my banana. Thanks for the help.
So that video was written, directed by our students, and we had our Climate Corps fellows help with the editing. And we also have, let me see if I can, another example of a video that was created by our compost champions. This is for, so this was to promote composting at one of our schools, Grandview.
Goes in the compost and it disappears like a ghost. It heats up like a roast, and the bugs come to do the most and break down the compost. We're out here on the coast making sure everyone knows how to compost. Step 1, put it in the right bin for when. Step 2, add it to the pile with your friend Kyle. Step 3, add some mulch and wait for the roast. Step 4, catch a spell like a Harry Potter and add some water. Step 5, take a seat and wait for the heat. Step 6, let it be for 2 to 3 weeks and you see it complete. Step 7, take a sip and throw it to the wind. Step 8, bring it to the garden and give it as a gift. Step 9, put it back in the earth so nutrient can get burned. Step 10, if you don't eat the most, put your leftovers in the compost. Compost isn't an egg, but it's so big.
Okay. Yeah, and they taught me something new with that video, which was the word Sigma, which I'd never heard of it before. So with our student-led initiative, we hope that our students can model the importance of composting, and serves as a reminder that with everybody composting, you know, our collective effort will help divert more food from the landfills, and just composting is really an activity that is better with more people involved. And so some of the next steps that we thought that would be helpful for you to determine how to implement a composting program is just asking some of these questions for your own, you know, environment. And so for us at all the 5 different school sites that we work in, they are also unique. And so these are some questions that help us determine what kind of program we can run. So the first question is assessing your team. And so just trying to get a good understanding of who your stakeholders are and what is your people power. So if you are in a school setting, you know, that means wanting to connect with your principal, your plant managers, your food services staff, so that you can be in alignment with what kind of program that you would want to see at your school. And then also just assessing how much dedicated staffing you can put in for this program. And then also doing a landscape assessment. So that's getting to know your waste hauler. Again, in California and in LA, we're able to divert green waste to their dumpsters, but that might not always be the case. Also, just doing a survey of what the cafeteria operations look like, getting a sense of how much food waste is being generated. And so at Garden School Foundation in 2018, we did that first assessment, the waste audit. And so that's always a great way to start to understand what kind of infrastructure you would need to put in. And then location constraints as well. So again, at some of our school sites, the gardens are very small. And so we had to run our composting operations outside of the garden. And so just looking into how much space you have will determine what kind of composting system you would want to implement. So there's a variety of different ways to compost. And so it's just determining what would be best for your location. And then, of course, just thinking through the resources that are required. And so mainly with composting, we want our browns and our greens to have healthy compost systems. And then there are also supplies around that, whether that's buying the vessels to contain your compost or making sure you have those shovels and trowels and bins ready for composting. And then, of course, with all of our programs, you know, funding is required to sustain our programs. So just looking into grants and where you can find support in your local offices. I think right now there's a lot of momentum behind composting. And so we're seeing a lot of different grants and campaigns specifically to support composting. And that about wraps up our presentation. I think we can go into the questions portion now.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot of them. There are some that are about especially resources. And those I think we'll add some resources that folks requested. So we'll add those to the resource handout. I'll update it once we get it posted on the website. So one question is, how do you manage rodents? Custodians in your school districts are strongly opposed to open compost piles because of rodents and odor.
Yeah, I think that's always like the first question that we get asked by our principals and our plant managers as well. And so what we tell them is that with our hot compost piles, one, we generally try to find a location that is open. And so I want to see if I can find the slide that has the photo of our compost piles. But if you're able to find an open area where there's not a lot of brush for rodents to hide in. You know, they don't like going, like running across like open fields. And so that's one way we prevent it. That's another reason why we only compost fruits, veggies, grain items, is because it doesn't create as strong of an odor as some of like the meat and dairy products. And the way we build our piles is, you know, we try to get them to be like a 4x4 mound, and then we do a very heavy mulch cap to kind of suppress any of those odors, make it look more tidy, and that I think also keeps rodents away because our piles are capped with such a thick layer of mulch. We also tell our school staff that the reality is that there are like rodents that already exist on campus, and we're not the ones attracting the rodents. They like already are there. And we do our best to prevent any rodents from coming. So at one of our school sites where we do compost in the garden, we laid down hardware cloth at the bottom to prevent any rodents from coming in and like nesting on the piles. And then also because we are turning our piles weekly, they're being disturbed enough where there's not an opportunity for them to nest. And again, with like the hot compost piles, they're getting up to temperatures of 130, 165 degrees. So it's too hot for them to really burrow in the piles. What we have found is that there will be, overnights, potentially like something visiting our piles, because we'll come in the next day and see like an indentation. But we, again, just say that they were already there. We didn't attract them.
We also cap, like, it's like almost like a 6-inch cap of mulch that we put on top. So it also deters, like, oftentimes we see those imprints, they're not actually getting to anything besides the mulch. So that also helps.
Awesome. Thank you. There's a question. Are you adding food waste every single day? If so, who adds it? And also, is the food waste pre-sorted in the cafeteria prior to heading outside?
Yes, so the food is pre-sorted by our students. So we have like those 2 different buckets set up for them. And so they do that first step of sorting out the meat and dairy in one bucket, and then the fruits and veggies and grains in another bucket. And so with that bucket of fruits and veggies and grains, we do add it to our piles every day. And so it's either one of our paid staff members or one of our Climate Corps fellows who do that daily implementation of the work. And so they'll just add that day's buckets to one of our existing piles.
I also want to add that we're in LA, so our cafeterias are outside. So when you're seeing pictures of like the buckets on blacktop, that's because our cafeterias are outside as well. So just kind of putting that in perspective.
Do you also collect back of the house organic waste? So carrot tops, damaged lettuce, from the kitchen?
I can jump in it. So our cafeterias don't do any scratch cooking. It's a centralized kitchen that then they ship things out. And so there aren't a lot of like carrot tops and things like that. The schools, when the green bins were added to campus 2 or 3 school years ago, there was a training for cafeteria staff on what to put in there. And so there are, depending on the school site and depending on our relationship with the cafeteria managers and staff, some will just give us like, say, a bucket of pears, or a basket of pears went bad, they were supposed to give out for lunch and they can't. They do give them to us. And then if, maybe we're not as involved with that cafeteria staff, or like they're a little kind of keep their distance, they are trained to put it in the green bin specifically. So if it doesn't come to us, it does go in the green bin.
Let me see. Thank you. Someone is currently running a similar program at a school where they're a farmer educator with Farm to School. However, it's just the beginning and only has support of a few teachers and administration. Do you have suggestions to help grow and gain the support or attention of city officials to start a pilot program?
Yeah, so you know, part of that is just building those relationships with the city officials. And so for us, we really started with building a relationship with the waste hauler. So LA Unified uses 3 different waste haulers. All of our schools are serviced by one waste hauler. So before we started the planning phase of that original grant, we set up meetings with them so that they knew what we were doing and we had their support from the get-go. Having their support made it much easier to approach administration, district officials, things like that. And because food waste is such a hot topic right now, you know, for us, what really helps change people's attitudes is that data. So being able to show, like, even if it's that original waste audit of like, this is how much is getting put in the landfill every day, or like, this is the weight of today's cafeteria trash, and then this is what it could be. So having that data, also same thing with redistribution numbers, same thing with how that breakdown of redistribution, what that breakdown of redistribution looks like the district is really excited to save money and get more food in kids' bellies. And so the more data you have, the easier it is to convince people. But we also recognize like collecting that data is a whole human power job on its own.
Thank you. What if any hurdles did you encounter when distributing rescheduled food to students and their families after school or at pickup time? Are there any concerns or pushback because of liability?
Yeah, so for LA Unified, you do have to be an approved nonprofit partner. So the school can't redistribute. That's not allowed. It has to be a nonprofit. So there is an application process where they vet you, and then because we're the nonprofit partner coming in and taking ownership of it, that kind of releases them of liability. For us, there is, and I don't know if this is a national law or just a California law, but like ultimately like a Good Samaritan law, that if you are redistributing food with good intention, you're kind of exempt from any negative things that happen. I would say really the hurdle for us was that we were approved at 24th Street, which is why we were able to redistribute at all of those sites, but it took over a year for our application to get approved for the other sites. Now they've shifted where if you're an approved partner for one school, you can do it at all schools. But that was a big hurdle for us that kind of delayed our implementation at the other sites to actually redistribute.
Awesome, thank you. Are students in the compost club, is this during the school day or is it after school?
Yeah, our compost club was embedded during the school day. So we work with teachers in identifying time periods that would work for their schedule. And through the application, the students needed to get permission from their teachers and parents as well, to make sure that it's okay for them to miss an hour of class time a week. And so with that, our teachers were able to let us know which students were able to do that. And then we did have to turn away some students because maybe they were still catching up on their math standards, and so they couldn't afford to be out of the classroom during that time. And yeah, so the application was kind of our way to vet that process.
Yeah, and we've only so far done one. We piloted that student-led initiative program at Grandview last spring. And so we're implementing it all of our school sites this year. But we really also wanted to make sure that just because a student is behind in a certain subject, that doesn't keep them from participating. So like data scientists, for example, we've made it really math focused, where if a student is maybe a little behind in math, they could be assigned the data scientist group. So that way they may be missing an hour of English language arts, but they're getting an extra hour of math to support that. And same thing with Compost Champions, right? Anne is the one that's the media like literacy one. And so same thing, if like maybe they're a little behind in their ELA work, like they could be assigned that one. So there is this partnership with the teacher where the teachers are seeing who's applying, they're reviewing their application and then kind of helping us with that sorting. But after kind of the spring and seeing those hurdles, or there was even a teacher who opted out of having her students be able to apply because they were a little bit behind as a group. And so we really wanted to come up with ways to reduce hurdles. And so really attaching standards to some of those really did help us you know, make sure that every student could participate if they were wanting to.
And who supervises the students that get pulled out?
It would be for us, our team of Climate Corps fellows.
Awesome, thank you. And I love the thinking of equity as you develop this program. That's really awesome. This is like real world experience, right? So I'm sure it's very valuable. Who leads the trash sorting at lunch? Someone had trouble getting it going at the start of the year due to volunteer or parents not being ready to sign up. So is it a teacher student led combo?
Yes, so we have a paid staff member who works with us part-time at each one of our larger school sites that has cafeteria to compost. And so we've hired either like a campus aide from the school who did their morning hours at the school, and then we'll shift to our team member position. And it's also a great position for parents who are looking to spend more time on campus. And so we also have 2 hired parents who take on that role for us.
Yeah, and we recognize like that is the big hurdle for folks. That was kind of feedback we got as, you know, we talked to other organizations or schools or districts who were interested in this program, was that it costs money to run this program, right? Like if we're having a part-time staff member in the cafeteria daily to help us with all of that. And so that was one of the reasons we created the student-led initiative program. So that way we could see what it would be like if we were trying to reduce staffing, and we're able to include the students a little bit more into it. We also, which we didn't cover in this presentation, but we also looked at a breakfast. We also are doing a breakfast in the classroom composting initiative. So California's free meals, universal free meals, and so they offer breakfast and lunch. And so recognizing that breakfast happens in the classroom setting, and so just having a bucket and having students be able to do that, separate it, and it can go directly into the municipal compost is another way that we were trying to reduce hurdles and see if that kind of program could be adopted a little more easily for either just a single teacher or a school or a district that maybe didn't have the financial support to like hire folks for it. And then we also are piloting a vermicompost in the classroom program, which we call Adopt a Pet. So we have a opportunity for teachers to have a worm bin in their classroom. So maybe again, maybe their whole school isn't on board, maybe the district isn't on board, but like one teacher is really dedicated to composting. And so that's something we're piloting this fall, getting a couple of our Pasadena Unified, our one Pasadena Unified school. They use a zero sort waste hauler, which hopefully they're actually sorting. But so because of that, we can't actually do, and the size of the garden, we can't do composting on campus. And so we designed this Adopt a Pet where a classroom could have a vermicompost bin and there's educational materials. We've created like an Amazon list where someone could just easily order all of the things. But again, trying to figure out like, how is this replicable and scalable for all different sorts of schools and districts and teachers who are wanting to be involved? But again, the hiring someone and having a staff member does create, you know, a financial burden. And so if you can work with your district or your school for the folks who are already doing cafeteria work at lunchtime, that would be great, whether they're supervisors or teachers or whoever it is. And then again, then it's the question of, do you have access to a green bin where there isn't a lot of labor involved of caring for those piles? Or if you do have the volunteer or financial support to like actually be building those piles. So one of the schools we expanded to this year is Rockdale. It's up in Eagle Rock, and they don't have, their campus doesn't have a place where we could build piles. So everything is going into the green bin. So we purposely expanded them this year to kind of understand what that program would look like.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. But folks are wondering what funding streams you have. Is this all grant funded? How did you find the funding for all these different pieces? And then what does the annual budget look like?
Yeah, so currently the program is fully supported by Sprouts Healthy Communities Foundation. So we're super grateful for them. To run this program at 5 schools, it is about $200,000. So that covers Anne as a full-time position to cover to manage the Cafeteria to Compost program. That includes our 5 part-time staff members who are, one of them is each of the school sites in the cafeteria. That covers materials, that covers we have our 10 Climate Corps fellows, and they receive a phone stipend as well as some other things for being a part of our staff. So it is, again, we recognize the financial burden of this program. We also, again, are so grateful to Sprouts for sticking with us and helping us launch this. But we have created these other initiatives to try to see, again, that how other people can do this work without that funding. And so we do have those other models. We'd be happy to share more information about them. We have some questions in the survey where we may ping you to be part of our feasibility study to talk about what this would look like at your school or your district or your classroom. But yeah, there is a significant burden. And so we are really lucky to have Sprouts. In the future, we are going to be combining our Seed to Table, which is our educational garden program, with our Cafeteria to Compost program, as well as we also recognize that because we have that Climate Corps partnership, we do have, and it's free to host them for the host site. And so we are running this program on free labor to us. And so we're very conscious of that and making sure that this is a really sustainable program in the long run. So again, why we started the student-led initiative, why we're doing breakfast in the classroom, why we're doing this Adopt a Pet, is to make sure that this has long-lasting and far-reaching implications, not only for us, but anyone else who's interested in it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. One more time, thank you so much, Anne and Rachel. This has been incredible. The videos were amazing. And I'm sure folks are taking so many lessons out of this presentation. So if you would like their contact information, or it'll be in the slides, which is part of a resource handout. And just to conclude, just want to remind folks that there is a feedback survey for the SGSO network as well. And what did you enjoy about this presentation? What other topics you would like to see? It will be in your email as well as a follow-up. And if we can go to the next slide. Awesome. And one more. And then this is part of our Growing School Gardens Webinar Summit. Our next webinar is November 20th. And the title is Real Life Garden Heroes, How Teaching Diverse Voices Improves Literacy and SEL. We will take a break in December, and we'll come back to this series in January with Educating on a Changing Planet, Drought-Resistant and Climate-Resilient Garden Strategies for Our Future. So please register at the link in the presentation, as well as it will be in your email. And one more time, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time and hope you took something new today to apply into your program. And final slide, please. And you can find us at SGSO Network on Instagram, our website, sgsonetwork.org, or if you would like to reach out for any other follow-up questions, feel free to send us an email at info@sgsonetwork.org. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day. And